The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
Hello, Patriots. Welcome back to Signal 76, where we cut through the liberal media noise and deliver the truth that mainstream outlets refuse to tell you. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep into another congressional hearing that perfectly exposes the Democrats' twisted priorities and their complete disconnect from hardworking American families. Before we get started, if you're tired of the lies and propaganda coming from the establishment media, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and ring the notification bell. We're building an army of informed patriots who refuse to be silenced. And your support keeps us fighting for the truth. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. Smash that like button if you agree with what you're hearing. And stick around until the very end, because I'm going to reveal something that will absolutely blow your mind about how the Democrats are manipulating these numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Bessen, Secretary Bessen, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator Warren.
You're the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you. What is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you. So do the Conservative Tax Foundation and Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, conservative groups. Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
okay, so,
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score. Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care, but it matters not, it does matter to you if we're knocking people off their health care, but not.
Well, first of all, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
Well, first of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessen, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering
No,
it.
you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much, but it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
We do have some differences of opinion. However, we also have a time crunch. I'm going to ask the remaining.
Today, we're breaking down a recent congressional hearing where we witnessed yet another shameful display of Democratic theatrics and economic illiteracy. What you just heard was Treasury Secretary Bessen being ambushed by a Democrat senator who clearly doesn't understand basic economics or fiscal responsibility. This hearing perfectly illustrates everything that's wrong with the Democratic Party's approach to governance and why we cannot allow them to continue their destructive policies. Let's start with the elephant in the room. The Democrats are calling this Republican legislation the big, beautiful bill, and they're claiming it will knock 16 million people off healthcare coverage. But here's what they don't want you to know, and this is absolutely critical for every American to understand. The Treasury Secretary immediately corrected this inflated number, pointing out that it's overstated by 5.1 million people. That's not a small error. Patriots. That's deliberate misinformation designed to scare the American people. But even more importantly, let's talk about what's really happening with these healthcare numbers. The Secretary pointed out that 8 million of the CBO's projected coverage losses come from work requirements. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about requiring able-bodied adults to work in order to receive government benefits, and the Democrats are calling this throwing people off healthcare. This is exactly the kind of twisted logic that has gotten our country into the fiscal mess we're in today. Work requirements aren't cruel or unusual. They're common sense. They're about dignity, self-reliance, and the fundamental American principle that if you can work, you should work. Our Medicaid system was designed to be a safety net for mothers, children, and those who genuinely cannot provide for themselves. It was never intended to become a permanent lifestyle for able-bodied adults who simply choose not to contribute to society. The Secretary made another crucial point that the Democrats conveniently ignored. He mentioned that Medicaid is currently being used by 1.4 million illegal aliens. Let that sink in, patriots. While American citizens are struggling to afford health care, while our veterans are waiting months for appointments, while hardworking families are choosing between paying for medicine and putting food on the table, we're providing free health care to people who shouldn't even be in this country. This is the insanity of Democratic priorities. They want to expand government dependency while importing more people to depend on government programs. It's a recipe for fiscal disaster, and it's completely unsustainable. The Secretary was absolutely right to point this out, and every American should be outraged that this is happening. Now let's talk about the tax provisions in this legislation, because this is where the Democrats' economic illiteracy really shines through. The senator kept referring to $4 trillion in tax giveaways, going to millionaires and billionaires. This is the same tired, class warfare rhetoric that Democrats have been peddling for decades, and it reveals their fundamental misunderstanding of how economic growth actually works. The Secretary correctly pointed out that a huge portion of these tax cuts go to family-owned businesses that are structured as pass-through entities. These aren't giant corporations or billionaire hedge fund managers. These are your local restaurant owners, construction companies, small manufacturers, and family farms. These are the businesses that employ millions of Americans and form the backbone of our economy. When we cut taxes on these businesses, they don't stuff the money under their mattresses. They reinvest it. They hire more workers. They buy more equipment. They expand their operations. This creates a multiplier effect throughout the entire economy that benefits everyone, including those workers who the Democrats claim to care so much about. The Democrats want you to believe that allowing people to keep more of their own money is somehow a giveaway. This is backwards thinking at its worst. The money belongs to the people who earned it in the first place. Government taking less of it isn't a giveaway. It's basic respect for property rights and the fruits of honest labor. Let's examine the deficit argument, because this is where things get really interesting. The Democrat senator cited all these supposedly independent groups, claiming the bill would add trillions to the debt. But notice how she conveniently ignored the Secretary's response about tariff revenue. The CBO projects $2.4 trillion in deficit impact, but they also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. Even using the CBO's own numbers, that's a $400 billion surplus. The Democrats want to have it both ways. They want to cite CBO scoring when it supports their narrative, but they want to ignore it when it doesn't. This isn't honest debate. It's political manipulation. The Secretary was absolutely right to call this out as Washington, D.C. math, because that's exactly what it is. And let's talk about tariffs for a moment, because this is another area where the Democrats are completely wrong. Tariffs aren't just about raising revenue, though they certainly do that effectively. Tariffs are about protecting American workers and American industry from unfair foreign competition. For decades, we've allowed China and other countries to dump cheap goods into our markets while maintaining massive barriers against American exports. This has devastated American manufacturing, destroyed countless jobs, and made us dangerously dependent on foreign supply chains. We saw during the pandemic what happens when we rely on other countries for critical goods. Tariffs help level the playing field and encourage companies to bring manufacturing back to America where it belongs. The revenue from tariffs is just a bonus. The real benefit is the jobs, the industrial capacity, and the national security that comes from having a strong domestic manufacturing base. The Democrats either don't understand this or they don't care because they're more interested in cheap foreign goods than good American jobs. Now let's address the broader issue of government spending, because this goes to the heart of what's wrong with our fiscal policy. The Secretary correctly identified government spending as out of control and unsustainable, and he's absolutely right. We're spending money we don't have on programs we can't afford for people who often don't deserve it. The federal government has become a massive wealth redistribution scheme that punishes productivity and rewards dependency. We're taking money from people who work and giving it to people who don't. We're borrowing against our children's future to fund programs that often do more harm than good. This has to stop, and it has to stop now. The Democratic senator seemed shocked that anyone would prioritize fiscal responsibility over expanding government programs. This perfectly encapsulates the difference between conservative and liberal thinking. Conservatives understand that government has limited resources and must prioritize spending on essential functions. Liberals believe government should do everything for everyone, regardless of cost or effectiveness. This isn't sustainable. It isn't fair to future generations. Every dollar we spend today on unnecessary programs is a dollar that our children and grandchildren will have to pay back with interest. Every expansion of government dependency is a step away from the self-reliance and personal responsibility that made America great. The work requirements issue deserves special attention because it reveals so much about Democratic priorities. The idea that requiring able-bodied adults to work in exchange for government benefits is somehow cruel or unusual shows how far we've strayed from basic American values. Work isn't punishment, it's dignity. It's purpose. It's the foundation of self-respect and personal achievement. When we remove work requirements, we're not helping people. We're trapping them in cycles of dependency. We're telling them that society expects nothing from them, that they have nothing valuable to contribute. This is actually far more insulting and demeaning than expecting them to work for their benefits. Countries around the world have implemented work requirements with tremendous success. They've seen reductions in dependency, increases in employment, and improvements in personal outcomes for the people involved. The data is clear. Work requirements work. They help people transition from dependency to self-sufficiency, which benefits everyone. The Democrats' opposition to work requirements reveals their true agenda. They don't want people to become self-sufficient. They want them dependent on government programs because dependent people vote for bigger government. It's a cynical political calculation that sacrifices human dignity for political power. Let's also examine the healthcare coverage numbers more carefully because the Democrats are being deliberately misleading here. When they say 16 million people will lose healthcare coverage, they're implying that these people will have no access to medical care. This is simply false. Many of these people will transition to private insurance, often through their employers as they enter the workforce thanks to work requirements. Others will purchase insurance on the individual market. Still others will access care through community health centers, charity care programs, or direct primary care arrangements. The idea that government insurance is the only way people can access healthcare is a liberal myth. In fact, many people prefer private alternatives because they offer better access, shorter wait times, and more choice in providers. Government insurance often comes with restrictions, delays, and bureaucratic hassles that private insurance doesn't have. Furthermore, the current system is unsustainable. Medicaid enrollment has exploded over the past decade, driven partly by the Affordable Care Act's expansion and partly by policies that removed work requirements and other accountability measures. This explosive growth is bankrupting state budgets and creating an enormous fiscal burden for taxpayers. We need to return Medicaid to its original purpose, providing a safety net for those who truly need it. This means prioritizing pregnant women, children, elderly Americans, and people with disabilities. It means ending the practice of providing free health care to able-bodied adults who can work but choose not to. The immigration aspect of this issue cannot be ignored. The Secretary's point about 1.4 million illegal aliens receiving Medicaid benefits is absolutely outrageous. These are people who have broken our laws to enter the country, and we're rewarding them with free health care while American citizens struggle to afford basic medical care. This is not compassion, it's injustice. Every dollar spent on health care for illegal aliens is a dollar that could have gone to an American citizen in need. Every hospital bed occupied by someone who shouldn't be in the country is a bed unavailable to a legal resident. Every emergency room visit by an illegal alien increases wait times and costs for everyone else. We need to end this practice immediately. People who are in this country illegally should not receive any government benefits, period. If they need emergency medical care, they should receive it, but they should also be processed for deportation. We cannot continue to provide incentives for illegal immigration while our own citizens struggle. The broader tax policy discussion reveals fundamental differences in economic philosophy. The Democrats view every tax cut as a giveaway, as if the money belongs to government first and people second. This is completely backwards. In America, the money belongs to the people who earn it. Government gets to tax some of it to fund essential services, but the default assumption should be that people keep what they earn. High taxes don't just reduce individual prosperity, they harm the entire economy. When businesses pay high taxes, they have less money to invest in growth, innovation, and job creation. When individuals pay high taxes, they have less money to spend on goods and services, which reduces demand throughout the economy. The pass-through entity provisions that the Secretary mentioned are particularly important for small businesses. These businesses often operate on thin margins and depend on retained earnings to fund growth and weather economic downturns. High tax rates on pass-through income can be the difference between a business thriving and a business closing its doors. Family farms are especially vulnerable to high tax rates because they often have high asset values but relatively low cash flows. When tax rates are too high, family farms are forced to sell to corporate agribusiness companies just to pay their tax bills. This destroys rural communities and concentrates agricultural production in the hands of large corporations. The tariff revenue component of this legislation represents a return to smart trade policy after decades of naive globalism. For too long, we've operated under the assumption that free trade is always good trade, regardless of whether our trading partners play by the same rules. This has been a disaster for American workers and American industry. China has been the biggest beneficiary of our naive trade policies. They've used currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and massive government subsidies to gain unfair advantages in global markets. Meanwhile, they've maintained high tariffs and non-tariff barriers against American exports. Tariffs help correct these imbalances by making foreign goods more expensive relative to American-made alternatives. This encourages consumers to buy American products and encourages companies to bring manufacturing back to the United States. It's not protectionism, it's fair trade. The revenue generated by tariffs can be used to reduce other taxes, particularly income taxes that fall heavily on working families. This shifts the tax burden from American workers to foreign producers and consumers, which is exactly where it should be. The Congressional Budget Office's methodology deserves scrutiny because they consistently underestimate the economic benefits of tax cuts and overestimate their costs. They use static analysis that assumes tax cuts don't change economic behavior, which is obviously false. When taxes are lower, people work more, save more, and invest more. Businesses expand and hire more workers. This generates additional economic activity that produces more tax revenue. The CBO's track record on major legislation is poor. They consistently overestimate the costs of tax cuts and underestimate the benefits of spending reductions. Their projections on the Affordable Care Act were wildly inaccurate, both in terms of enrollment numbers and fiscal impact. Their methodology is biased toward big government solutions and against free market alternatives. Independent analysis from organizations like the Tax Foundation consistently shows that tax cuts, particularly on business income, generate significant economic growth that partially or fully offsets the initial revenue loss. This is basic supply-side economics, and it's been proven correct time and time again. The Democratic senator's alignment with Elon Musk, as the secretary noted, is particularly ironic. Musk has been increasingly critical of government waste and inefficiency, particularly as he's gained more experience dealing with federal bureaucracy through his various business ventures. His support for fiscal responsibility and government efficiency puts him at odds with traditional Democratic spending priorities. This highlights a broader trend among successful entrepreneurs and business leaders who are increasingly frustrated with government overreach and fiscal irresponsibility. They understand that excessive government spending crowds out private investment and reduces economic growth. They see how regulations and taxes can stifle innovation and entrepreneurship. The work requirements debate goes beyond just fiscal considerations. It's about the kind of society we want to be. Do we want to be a society that expects nothing from able-bodied adults? Or do we want to be a society that encourages personal responsibility and contribution? Do we want to create cycles of dependency? Or do we want to help people achieve self-sufficiency and dignity? The evidence from states that have implemented work requirements is overwhelmingly positive. Employment rates increase, dependency rates decrease, and personal outcomes improve. People feel better about themselves when they're contributing rather than just receiving. Children benefit from seeing their parents work and contribute to society. Work requirements also ensure that limited resources go to those who need them most. When able-bodied adults without dependents are required to work, more resources are available for families with children, elderly Americans, and people with disabilities. This is basic common sense resource allocation. The healthcare industry itself benefits from work requirements because they reduce the burden of uncompensated care. When more people have employer-sponsored insurance, hospitals and doctors spend less time providing charity care and more time providing paying services. This improves the financial stability of healthcare providers and ultimately benefits all patients. The immigration component of Medicaid spending represents a fundamental breakdown in the rule of law. We have immigration laws for a reason, and those laws should be enforced consistently and fairly. When we provide government benefits to people who are in the country illegally, we're essentially rewarding lawbreaking and encouraging more illegal immigration. This creates a vicious cycle where illegal immigration increases the burden on social services, which requires higher taxes on legal residents, which reduces economic growth and opportunity for American citizens. Meanwhile, the availability of free benefits encourages more illegal immigration, which perpetuates the cycle. The solution is straightforward. No government benefits for people who are in the country illegally, combined with robust enforcement of immigration laws. People who want to come to America should do so legally, through proper channels, after background checks and health screenings. This protects both American citizens and legal immigrants from the negative consequences of uncontrolled illegal immigration. The fiscal sustainability issue cannot be overstated. We're currently on a path toward fiscal catastrophe, with deficits and debt growing faster than the economy. Interest payments on the national debt already consume a significant portion of federal revenues, and this will only get worse as interest rates rise and debt levels increase. Young Americans will bear the brunt of this fiscal irresponsibility. They'll face higher taxes, reduced government services, and a weaker economy as resources are diverted from productive investments to debt service. This is generational theft, and it's morally wrong. We need to make hard choices now to avoid even harder choices later. This means reforming entitlement programs, reducing discretionary spending, and implementing policies that promote economic growth. The legislation discussed in this hearing represents a step in the right direction, but much more needs to be done. Patriots, what we witnessed in this hearing is a perfect example of why we cannot allow the Democrats to regain control of our government. Their priorities are completely backwards. They care more about expanding government dependency than promoting self-sufficiency. They care more about providing benefits to illegal aliens than taking care of American citizens. They care more about class warfare rhetoric than economic growth and opportunity. The Republican approach, represented by this legislation, offers a clear alternative. It prioritizes work over welfare, self-reliance over dependency, and fiscal responsibility over political pandering. It recognizes that sustainable prosperity comes from productive economic activity, not government spending. It understands that the best anti-poverty program is a job, and the best social program is a growing economy. This is why your vote matters so much in every election. This is why we need to stay informed, stay engaged, and stay united in defense of American principles. The mainstream media won't tell you these truths. The educational establishment won't teach them to your children. It's up to us, the Patriot movement, to preserve and promote the values that made America great. If this analysis opened your eyes to what's really happening in Washington, make sure you share this video with everyone you know. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our content. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on this legislation and what Congress should do next. And remember, we're building a movement of informed patriots who refuse to be silenced by the establishment media. Stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for America. This is Signal 76, and we'll see you in the next video.